on the absence talaga of Marcos Jr. Kasi it might be the logical decision for Marcos Jr. to not show up in the debates because numerous surveys have already shown that he's leading by a wide margin. And with the numerous debates that we have witnessed already, yung margin na to seems to be only marginally affected by his absence. And based on the few surveys and the changes that they've registered so far, it seems like Marcos supporters are strong in their resolve to support the candidate despite this delinquency. So that being said po, if my hypothesis holds, it seems like debates are unlikely making a significant impact on the general outcomes of the May elections. And that could be indicative of the fact that debates and similar fora like this are not really achieving the objective it set for itself. Kumbaga nagiging echo chamber na lang siya, hardening the line, defining the categories, and highlighting what we already know in the end. So absence is a strategy in itself, and we can see how it has affected this. So my question for tonight's panelists po, how could we improve on these debates? Or better yet, how can we better address the objectives of having election debates to begin with, which is to enlighten voters to the menu of choices given to them? I guess, what can we learn from this experience altogether?
I think that's a good question. Anyone from our panelists who would like to respond?
May I give it a try?
Yes, Jal, and I think Prof. Atienza would also like to respond. Yes, Jal, ikaw muna. Jal.
Ako muna, sige. Following the logic of at least the assumptions there, it appears that debates really, if marginal, have very, very little impact. No, if we were to look at the surveys, neither are surveys as well. So the point here is that we see here a case where you have a debate that is organized by the Comelec, and you have a candidate who chose not to attend, but not just this debate, even the prior debates. No? And like I said earlier, it's either complacency or cowardice from being subject to, an assessment of peers or even the public. Debates are there. They could be used as instruments, as channels to gather information, to persuade the undecided, to affirm or reinforce those who have already made their decisions, or to change the minds of those who thought they would support candidate A, but because of the new information would rather support candidate B. The purpose and the objective of debates and events like these made in public are not monolithic in that sense. No? But what we have here is not just absence. Perhaps you probably know that while this was being broadcast, the candidate absent was being interviewed by a state-sponsored office, the PCOO. So ayaw niyang umattend sa Comelec, gusto lang niya magpa-interview, siya lang mag-isa ng PCOO. Kasabay itong nangyayari, no? And it was a pre-recorded interview, so kasabay siyang broadcast. No? So, anong ibig sabihin nun? Ayaw niya kasi na mapunta nitong sitwasyon na ganitong debate. Gusto niya, meron siyang sariling production, sariling mga tanong, sariling pag-handle doon sa kanyang mga sagot o mga tanungan. Hindi nga natin alam, may sariling script no? But that's precisely the point. We have all these questions because had this candidate been present in the debate, then we would be subject to the same kind of questions, the same rules and the same standards. I think yun yung isa sa mga na-observe natin sa kasalukuyang eleksyon, lalo na sa ganong klaseng strategy. Absence, as you probably mentioned, is a strategy when you belittle the instruments of information, or when you are confident in the information because you are the ones, you and your team would be producing information. Pero ganun ba maging presidente? Di ba? Hindi naman ganun eh. Hindi mo naman kontrolado lagi yung sitwasyon at higit sa lahat, hindi naman dapat production lagi ito. No? So, those are just my thoughts eh. Absence is not just a strategy, it's an indication of either complacency or cowardice or both. You do not want to be subject to public scrutiny. Even as early as now, even with proto-accountability, kandidato ka pa lang eh. Ganun na. Those are just my opinions. Thank you.
Sara?
Yes, thanks Jean, and thank you Miko for the question. Very quickly lang because I already touched on this during my initial assessment. Siguro kung gusto nating improve yung importance ng debates, pwede nating sabihin pag baka we can recommend na pagka Comelec ang nag-sponsor ng debates, mabigat ang dapat either required or mabigat ang penalty pag hindi ka nag-show up. Kasi Comelec na to eh. Comelec sponsored debate. This is not debate sponsored by a media outfit. And secondly, of course, sa mga studies naman ng impact ng debates, wala siyang masyadong epekto dun sa talagang solid supporters na, lalong-lalo na of course in other countries with strong party membership. Pagka member na ng party, definitely will still vote for your candidate no matter how he or she performed during the debate. But it's opportunity, particularly in a country like the Philippines na walang strong political parties, wala namang mga mass membership sa mga political parties, may mga undecided pa rin. And the debate is an opportunity to see how candidates perform. May konting clue rin tayong kuha, how they think on their feet. May konting indications then about bits and pieces of their character, and at the same time also it's part of the election, the campaign and election process. If you decide not to participate, even if you say you're the front runner, then it shows you're a privileged person. You're a spoiled brat. You're thinking of yourself as above the rest and unique. And what does that say about you as a candidate presenting yourself to lead the country and to inspire the country and to represent the best of the country? Thank you.
Happy Family TV, good morning.
All right, I think we have a raised hand. Matt Ordonez.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for space. I'm surprised actually that this was happening. It's so late at night, and it's good to see familiar faces. Ma'am Ella, Jalton, Sol. I actually have a very simple question. It actually echoes I believe it was Miko asked it earlier, of how we can improve debates. I do want to ask though, and I think Jalton kind of mentioned this, that perhaps we need to improve the format of the debate. So if there were specific changes to the format, what would you recommend to the Comelec? How would they handle it? Because to be honest, right now, I think it was handled pretty well given the format. It was managed and moderated quite well. But is there more structural changes that we have to make in order to make it normal for voters? And second, again, before we think about changes, I am curious as to who really benefits with the current format of the debate. Because if you ask me, we can compare. So I do have some observations. Number one, Lenny actually does not benefit a lot from the debates in terms of the surveys, and she's stagnated in a way. But the ones who did benefit, number one, are Manny Pacquiao, who even Sir July Tihangi has said that he is the most improved debater. Parang gumagaling siya habang tumatagal, to the point where a lot of people like him better than certain candidates. Like, anyway, Montemayor targeted Pacquiao and he held his own. So he looked really good. So, and I think another noticeable improvement is Mangu Dadatu, who scored higher than Calyodi of all people. Calyodi is far more popular social media, but in terms of surveys, Mangu Dadatu is leading, and we only know of Mangu Dadatu through the survey. So I'm questioning, like, who benefits from the current format of the debate? So those are my two questions. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Matt, for your question. So, yung tanong ay tungkol sa suggested format and who benefits from the current format. Anyone from our panelists would like to speak first? Professor Naval?
That's a very pointed question. It makes me think even more. No, who benefits? It's like uh, what how it how I
Sino sa inyo
look at
nakanood
it
ng
is yung
debate kanina?
immediate reaction in my mind is, can there be formats that would beneficial to some or to one and less beneficial to all? Or is it possible the real candidate, regardless of the format, will be not necessarily standing out exceptionally in because of the changes of the format, but at least there's constancy. So I would rather go for a constancy that is high rather than yung mga spikes and lows, particularly extreme. You may People may point out their perceived improvement of Mr. Mangundato or even Manny Pacquiao, but when you talk about the average and also the constancy, then I think, in my opinion, si Ping is constant, but Lenny would be higher if there was a scoreboard that I would make. But I wish one of the things that I dislike being an instructor of you grade your students, because I think that there are times when the measure would be how constant they are, and minsan in time na score would not really reflect constancy. But in this case, I would go for the constancy. Magpahabol lang ako kasi I think medyo the line was a bit disturbed or unreliable earlier. Doon sa question regarding absence of the candidate of Mr. Marcos Jr. And I think this is echoed, but I think I would like to butt in on the supposed absence. It's not an absence anymore. It's a boycott strategy at the moment. Baka magpalit sila somewhere down the line, who knows? But at the moment, it is an established fact. They have been boycotting, and it's not only Mr. Marcos Jr., but even his vice president is absenting, and in fact boycotting the debates or the public discussions sponsored by media, by traditional or other networks. So it's a deliberate one. But then, how do we address this? And I was echoing earlier, there has to be a more compelling power or rules that the Comelec would have to enforce, such that it will not be, it makes the Comelec and the exercise a laughing stock. Kasi you cannot compel candidates to attend given the current situation. But if in the subsequent elections that we have, particularly positions for national office, that their attendance is they indeed prove that they are not nuisance candidates and they are serious candidates by attending, especially the fora that are sponsored by the Comelec. So it shows at the moment our weak party system, even the weak perception of our Comelec. It's not as strong and even respected by the candidates. So That's my take for the moment on the question earlier and this question that was given.
Salamat, Assistant Prof. Jaime. We have a question here from Gio Gomez. And I think this is addressed to Professor Atienza. Based on the similarities in some of their answers, do you think there are still opportunities for some candidates to form coalitions leading up to or even after the election? Prof. Atienza?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Gio. Thank you for your question. There are similarities, of course, in the responses to certain questions, but I think at this point we're already too far into the campaign, and if ever there should have been a coming together, that should have happened even before the campaign season started. So paliit na ng paliit yung window, parang ayaw na magbigayan, di ba? And mahirap ng tingnan ngayon yung possibility of coalition. So, I think kahit may similarities ng mga sagot kanina, baka pwede pagkatapos ng eleksyon kung ano yung sino yung mga pwedeng makasama together who can help each other, kung sino man yung manalo at magbuo ng cabinet, or maybe people who can help in giving advice. Yep.
Salamat, Prof. Atienza. I think we're running out of time, but we are on last question, and this could serve as your, what do you call this, parang final words for tonight. The question is, ano pong other important issues which could have been addressed in this debate? So I think all of you can answer this question. We will start with Associate Prof. Jal, and then Assistant Prof. Jaime, and then Prof. Atienza.
Yeah, probably my answer to that question is tied also with the earlier question by Gio. Hello, Gio. There are a number, or there are points of consensus dun sa ating mga kandidato, consensus din sa kung ano talaga para sa kanila yung mahalagang issue, no? What are the important or critical issues, not just for the campaigns, but for the presidency and for the next term, no? For yung susunod na mga taon, no? Of course, if you will notice, the theme of the Comelec, yung kanilang pamamaraan ng pagtatanong, may kinalaman dun sa pandemya at saka sa ekonomiya. And I think this is the general theme or the topic in addition to the specifics of their campaign. I would have wanted to hear some topics or some questions perhaps raised pagdating sa mga kandidato, no? One particularly, probably more specific discussion sana dun sa COVID response, no? Kung ganito ang response, ano yung specifics? Of course, some of our candidates already answered it, but they answered in terms of ano yung areas of concern, vaccination, yan, meron silang consensus dyan, no? Pero when I say specific, for instance, the issue, for instance, of us incurring debt, or the issue of our capacity, for instance, to lower cost in terms of the COVID response for particularly vaccination testing. Saan kaya, ano kaya ang sourcing, ano ang financing nito? No? I would have been interested in that discussions for us and also for the next president. Second, I think that I would have been more interested that they should have discussed would be particularly in the education sector. Yung tanong regarding education kanina, naka-frame kasi siya, education in relation to employment. No? Pero yung specifics, for instance, ng ano nangyayari, ano ang dapat gawin sa loob ng education sector para mas lalong tumaas ang quality, no? Hindi lamang yung budgetary intervention o pagtaas ng budget. Meron bang dapat baguhin dun sa particular na content that would assure better or improve quality of our students, of our graduates? No, I would have wanted to hear more of that from our candidates. Yun lamang po yung sa side ko. Thank you.
Assistant Prof. Jaime?
Thank you, Professor Jean. Undoubtedly, Comelec has a number of other topics lined up, and this is not just the only debate. I think scheduled so far. So I would imagine na nire-ration, trying to be selective. But I would agree generally that this issue about the pandemic and the economy are primary and more urgent at the moment. However, when you look at the overall agenda, other items that would have to be addressed, particularly by the candidates, these are some of the issues or topics that I think would have to be also addressed by the candidates in a formal, in an open forum like this one, but even a better forum. It happens that this is one years I monitor myself. For example, the issue on foreign policy. The problems that we experience right now are extended, or we are impacted by developments that happen externally. But undoubtedly, we are connected intrinsically, organically with the rest of the world. No bubble can firmly protect us from the COVID. So kahit sabi mo mag-strengthen, mag-secure ng borders, etc., that would help, especially on the early part. I was wondering if we did shut our borders from particularly incoming tourists or visitors from China in February at the time, or March 2020, would it have made a big difference? Maybe. Pero kahit sa hindi mo ma-pinpoint na magkakaroon ng real substantive consequence yung pagsasara, but at least at the political will, it shows that we are determined, regardless of the source, our interests vis-a-vis the interests of other countries. As to foreign policy, for example, saan naka-anchor yung kanyang foreign policy? How do they see the national interests and also the regional interests? Typical in ASEAN, when whoever becomes head of an ASEAN member state, ang basic platform ng foreign policy ay naka-ankla ASEAN. And in fact, this is attested, for example, in Indonesia and the others. Ang unang trip na ginagawa ng head of government is to an ASEAN country. Pero sa Pilipinas, I think we don't know, or our priorities are different. We go to the United States, we go to Europe, or even China. Such project the importance that we accord to the region where we belong. Also, undoubtedly, yung position sa South China Sea and to our good neighbor in the north. Maybe how to prepare and address if the war in Ukraine would continue on and even go even upward spiral. No? So these are some of the issues that I think would have to be addressed. Candidates trying to get our votes. Kasi how do you decide on issues that are not only domestic but external, that would impinge directly and indirectly on the country? And maybe the last one would be issues regarding reforms that the the presidential candidate would like to follow. Maybe they would have to articulate this even in greater detail. Those are some of my thoughts on the question. Thank you.
Salamat, Jaime. Prof.
Thank you, Jean. So, ano yung mga gusto ko pa sana na pag-usapan pero hindi na pag-usapan? But I'll stick with the two general themes of this evening's debate. Yung pandemic response at saka yung sa economy. Sa pandemic response, I would have wanted the candidates to discuss some more what they would have done better or what do if they get elected when it comes to better coordination between national and the local governments sa pandemic response kasi and then pag-usapan beyond pagpapatayo ng mga ospital, yung hospital beds, may discussion na kanina about making sure na yung mga health workers natin ay mabigyan ng mas maayos na incentives ng sweldo, tapos yung universal healthcare, yung pagtingin sa PhilHealth. But I think there should also be more emphasis on how to strengthen primary health care and making sure that we focus on prevention kesa ang problemahin natin ay lahat may sakit. So ang problema hospitals, hospital beds and enough hospitals. I would have wanted more discussion about what they think they could have done better to make IATF and the whole pandemic response of government more health crisis talaga yung focus and less ang role ng military and police, and how to make sure that even during lockdowns, the rights of people are also respected, tapos equal ang treatment, mahirap ka man or mayaman. So yun yung sa issues regarding pandemic response. Sa economy, I would have wanted and I hope in future debates mapag-usapan pa kasi bahagi ng ekonomiya natin, syempre ang ating OFWs, ang ating migrant workers. So ano Manila doon, lalong-lalo na yung mga naapektuhan ng pandemic. At pangalawa, hindi lang dahil Women's Month ngayon, pero napaka-importanting pag-usapan sa economy at sa labor ang kababaihan, ano ang specific programs to actually promote more women in the workforce, but at the same time to make sure that their rights are also protected and they are treated equally by everyone in the workplace and of course at home. Thank you very much.
Salamat, Ella, and thank you so much thank you so much to our panelists, and thank you for staying with us, Twitter audience, and thank you for tuning in to our discussion on the recently concluded Comelec presidential debates. Please tune in tomorrow evening at 9:45 p.m. for the second part of our discussion on debate performance of vice presidential candidates. Our guests tomorrow evening are Assistant Professor Sol Iglesias and Professor Jorge Tino. This ends our space tonight. Maraming salamat po sa lahat sa inyo muli at magandang gabi.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ayan, thank you very much, everyone. That was the UP for Halalan post-debate discussion. So, dahil tapos na sila, tapos na rin ako. Ganun lang yon. So, anong gusto nyong gawin? Gusto nyo mag-concert? Hindi, matulog na tayo, no? Ano ba nagtatrend ngayon sa Twitter? Tomorrow Together. Parehas kayo ng tatay ko, host. Bakit? Anong ginagawa ng tatay mo? Almatisang nakaabang lagi sa mga ganyan. Hindi naman ako nakaabang. Ano lang, natsempuhan ko lang. Bilang katatapos lang ng debate, why not stream na din, di ba? Actually, dapat yung debate live, kaso may ginagawa ako kanina. Tas ngayon, ayan, habang nagmi-midnight snack, nakikinig sa discussion. Ayan. Good morning everyone. Ano na rito? Sunday morning. Tulugan na, no? Tulugan na tayo. So, anong bago sa... May Facebook na ako. Tuwan-tuwa, nakabalik sa Facebook. So, good night guys. Thank you. Team Makasait, Whimsical Thoughts, Almatisang Vlog, Bentin. Ayan. Mag-e-end na ako. Salamat sa pagsama. Anyong. Babush na ba, host? Oo, babush na. Para makapag-Netflix na tayo. Bye-bye. Nasaan yung end? Ito pala.